welcome to the podcast. We're so glad that you joined us today. Today's topic reminds me of how I approach movies.
Actually, I was going to say, I wonder if people listening to this podcast have certain expectations
of what this podcast is going to be.
Yes, I hope they're not disappointed. Maybe when
there's a lot of pressure.
Maybe they should have really low expectations.
If you start here, guys, we will satisfy. So you just come down here, and then that's where we'll be. But like when I go to the movies, okay, because a movie can be fabulous, but if I have even higher expectations for it, the movie stinks.
This would happen all the time. This would happen all the time when we were first married. Yeah. Because I think we went to the movies more when we were first married. Just people in general, I think, went to the movies more,
ages ago,
30 years ago.
Yeah.
And we would be like all excited. And I guess maybe I just don't have maybe I have low expectations in life, but it was actually a point of conflict between the two of us because we would leave the movies and I'd be like, that was amazing. And Mike would be like, oh, it was okay. Yeah. I'm like, I thought you loved it. You were so excited.
I was so excited before the movie started. And my expectations determined the outcome or my feeling on the other side. 100%.
The difference between expectations and reality is the larger that difference is, the more our dissatisfaction is.
Yeah, there is an equation. We'll draw it up here on the chalkboard, I mean, but that's really, there is a formula here. And the reality.
There's something to be learned.
And as you look at your marriage, as we look at what we bring to our marriage, not just when we were first married, although it often obviously begins there, but it's throughout our marriage. It's what are we bringing to the table? What are we bringing as an expectation of our spouse, of our kids, all these things.
Of ourselves even.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. And we want to take time to look at our marriage because your marriage your kids their needs are almost always urgent, but your marriage is never urgent, or it's not urgent until it's in a crisis.
That's right.
And so we want to take some time to talk about your marriage and the expectations that we all bring into it and how to overcome them. So we're going to give you some big ideas as well as some practical helps and some personal experiences. So stay tuned to that. So,
but before we get into that, we just want to have another reminder about our getaway in Costa Rica.
Oh, yeah.
Coming up in February. There are still maybe, I don't know.
By the time it's like 4 or 5 spaces left.
So we're down to the wire here as far as room, but we are very excited and we want to invite more people to come, go and inquire. And if there's no more room, then, hey, you can get on a waiting list because we're going to be doing these twice a year.
That's right.
So don't worry if you're like, oh, I can't come because I'm having a baby or my daughter's having a baby or whatever, then, hey, have no fear. We're going to keep doing them.
Is that the only excuse, the legitimate excuse is them having a baby?
I don't know. Probably. Any other reason is not good enough.
Right. Well, and we mentioned this last podcast, but really excited that we're going to, I think this will be released before the Temperaments and Your Family Dynamics, a special date night.
So excited.
For moms, for dads, for husbands, for wives, for anybody who's a parent. You're going to want to tune into this live date night on August 23rd.
And you know what? I actually think this podcast about expectations does have a lot to do with your temperament.
Ooh.
And actually I was going to say that
make
before.
Sure we bring that up.
Yeah. But I am just so excited to be talking to Art and Lorraine because they don't just have great insights, but they've developed tools that really serve people.
Yeah.
I mean, their temperaments quiz, temperamentquiz.com, you go there, you can register for an account and then it tells you like how your temperament interacts with the temperaments of others, whether it's your spouse or your children. We've done this for our whole family and we get in this webinar, in this date night, to actually talk to the people who developed this. So I am so excited because that tool has been so helpful for us as a family.
That's right.
And so I first of all, just want to say thank you to them for developing this, but then I have some questions too.
Yeah.
Like I have some real pointed questions to, kind of dive deep into this. For those who come
to the webinar, either you join it and visit us live, we will have time for questions.
Yes.
And we also will have a free download, I believe. I think we're putting that together. If I'm not mistaken. So you'll have some additional resources to unpack and use from that. But if you can't watch it live, you'll get the recording later.
Right. But you have to register to get the recording.
You can't get it without registering.
Right. So if you can't come, no problem. Register anyway, and then we will get you the recording because it's going to be really good.
Yeah. And then...
I am doing a webinar for moms. I'm doing a webinar for mothers of daughters. And it's on preparing her for the journey to womanhood.
We're looking at you right now.
Yes. So, and in that, I'm going to talk about the 2 most important conversations you can have with your daughter, and then the 3 things that you need to do to prepare to be that guide for her.
Awesome.
And I just love moms so much. I love them. I think that they are doing such an incredibly important job. And so guiding your daughter through adolescence, there's nobody in the world that she needs more than her mom during that time. And I'm going to talk to them about why, and then what are some practical things that you can do to help your daughter. So, so again, register for the webinar. And if you come, we're going to have a time for questions and discussion, but then also you can get the recording of that as well.
So September 5th, you don't want to miss out on that. August 23rd for about the temperaments. All right, let's kind of...
And these are all free webinars too. By the way, guys, hey, free stuff. We love doing free. We love free. All right, so let's get into it.
All right, so first let's just start with expectations, right? I mean, I think we kind of know this. We already talked about this in the example of the movie, but happiness really is determined heavily based upon the expectations as we enter into any situation, right? Meaning that it's I guess it's a couple things, right? It's our expectations of the situations, our ability to notice and rejoice in little things, right? To recognize the ordinary stuff. And if our expectations are modest, life will usually exceed our expectations, right? But if we have high expectations, they often come unfulfilled and kind of leave us frustrated or feeling like we didn't get what we deserved, or we somehow feel gypped out, or there's injustice been done.
You know what? I remember talking to my grandmother who grew up during the Great Depression.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to her about what was it like growing up during that time.
That's right.
And she said, we didn't know we were poor. We didn't know anything. Yeah. She was like, I had a great childhood. She was like, I was very, very happy. And I think that in her, people who grow up like with nothing and grew up in poverty, their expectations for life, not that they don't want to strive to be better, because at the end of her life, her and my grandfather were very, very successful. My grandfather, wound up working for a bank, and they had more money at the end of her life than she probably ever imagined as a child. But her expectations were really low, as a kid. Yeah. She didn't expect that her parents would buy her designer clothes or sign her up for this class or that class. She was just like, no, we just went outside and played, low expectations. And so those having that, grounding in reality, she was very, very happy. You're content with less. And I feel like in today's society, where the standard of living, today's society, particularly in America, the standard of living has just gone up and up and up.
Yeah.
And there's so many young people who or young couples specifically, who kind of compare their beginning to somebody else's middle, or to their parents' end or middle,
And we have this deep desire to, and all of us desire comfort on some level, right? But those couples, people today, right? We have a much higher standard of living. The poor, at least here in America, right? The poor here are probably wealthier than many people throughout the world, at least throughout the centuries.
They still have cell phones and food and education and car and all of those things.
And that's a product of progress. But I go to like some developed countries. Like I remember talking to a missionary who, or maybe it was one of our kids, but just like the happiness that he saw, on the faces. Was it in Jamaica?
When Patrick went to Jamaica, and they were in the mountains visiting the poor, serving the poor.
And they had nothing, but they were all happy. And it's kind of reflection was just like, they have nothing, but they're joyful. He couldn't believe how
happy they were, And
then he says, and then I come back, and he flew back in the States, and you have these grumpy Americans who were at an airport because they had got a delay in their flight or whatever. And I get it. I can get grumpy too.
Yeah.
But it's like the contrast was so sharp.
Right.
That, and I think it's not just whether you have wealth or whether you have prospering in other areas of your life. It's what are those expectations that you're bringing to that situation?
So let's apply that to marriage,
right.
So I think that if we think about expectations in marriage, and we're going to share with you some of the expectations that the two of us have. I brought my prayer journal, so I have some things to share with you. And we were like trying not to like share them ahead of time so we could just like make this like really fresh for you guys. But I think that having realistic, not too high, because also you don't want to say, we don't want to tell you that going into marriage, you should have no expectations at all.
That's right.
That's not what we're saying. We're not saying you shouldn't strive to be better or strive to be intentional. But just to recognize that unrealistic expectations, especially the messages that the world gives, like sometimes we talk about like wedding world, when we're preparing for a wedding, we kind of go into like wedding world, and wedding world is like, like I found my soulmate, like
fairy tale come true.
Yes, exactly. Like our
you are my destiny.
Right. Our destiny is just beginning. And all of these like very aspirational and somewhat unrealistic sentiments that are being projected on these couples. It's almost like setting them up for failure, because like after like 3 months of marriage, and like, after cleaning up after, not that you're a slob or anything, you're not, but just like, but after like cleaning up after you and myself and everything, I was just like, I'm not feeling that this is my destiny. Like, this is my destiny. Like, really, and it's like, and then when we would have conflict, I remember our friend, Kimberly Hahn, telling me that the first time she and Scott got into a fight, she went to her mother and she was like, we're going to get divorced. Like,
it's
why
over.
are we
What
fighting?
happened?
It's over. And her mom was like, your dad and I, we fought too. Like, couples fight. Like, that is a realistic expectation. Right. And Kimberly was like, really? What? Like, she just didn't have that expectation. So I think it's really important to recognize, that's what we're saying, is that I think it's important to recognize, hey, this was an expectation that I have, and how am I going to react when that becomes,
because
there
are
fulfilled.
Plenty of things that we all bring to marriage, right? There's our own background experience. It's our own personality and temperaments, as we talked about earlier. All these things are brought to bear on our marriage. So what role does expectations? It's not the only thing, but it does play a big part, and it can continue if unchecked in our marriage. And a lot of times they're just unrealistic.
And I think that's why the divorce rate's so high,
And if you set your expectations, like if you make it such that the ideal is now your minimum expectation, and anything less than that, it's all falls apart. It just sets you up for failure. And as couples, we want to, I think we can all joke and laugh around certain expectations that we maybe first had in our beginning years of marriage. Yeah. But we'll go back and forth maybe and share some of ours.
Well, before that, what this made me think of too is the expectation, which I see a lot of times in young people today, that they'll have their finances will all be perfect when we get married. Or people saying, I'm going to delay marriage. I'm not going to get married until I've paid off my student loans, till we're both out of, our graduate degree, until we get this good job or whatever. And so by saying that, and I'm not saying to be irresponsible, but it gets to a certain point of like, so you're saying your expectation is that your entire marriage, you will be not just financially secure, but financially advanced, if you will. So then what happens when, as a lot of people have been married for a while, like there are financial things you cannot predict. Yeah. There is unemployment.
Are you setting yourself up for a failure by setting that as a marker of what's necessary to get married?
Exactly. Yeah, and so it's like, yes, so those financial things are important, but
be wise, be prudent.
But there is also a good expectation of, when we get married, we're going to have to struggle together. We're going to figure this out together, as opposed to, I expect that when we get married, we are always going to have money in the bank. You are always going to have a good job. I will always have a good job. Money will never be something that we worry about. That's unrealistic. Like it's literally, it's unrealistic, because no matter how much money you make, you can always overspend.
And so there's the financial parts, but there's also a a trouble that we've seen another couple really point this out to us really well, that we expect our spouse to be God for us, to do things that only God can do, fulfilling us, completing us in a
God is our destiny.
Yeah.
God is who our soul is meant for.
Right.
All of those things that the world talks about your spouse are really to be for the Lord.
Yeah. So and so we can all, and I think we all have levels of this, right? It's like you maybe have early marriage expectations that maybe you slowly work through. But there's still expectations that hold on and or take on different forms as you mature. And it's like, I think like that idea of, have I expected my spouse to do things and give me and or receive from them things that really I should only receive from God?
Yes. That's such an important question.
And that's one of those things that you can keep asking at any point in your marriage. I don't care if you're 50, 60 years marriage, you can still probably plumb the depths of that and realize, okay, there are some expectations that I really need to align with reality, right? And also, you said this earlier, but we're not talking about simply lowering your expectations. That's not, or having no expectations, because if you enter marriage thinking that I don't have any expectations, I don't know if that's good either, right?
Definitely not.
One,
you should have hopes and dreams,
Yeah. And how people grow is that, like in a certain sense, maybe not expectation, but you had a vision of what I could be, right? You held up this image for me and for yourself of who I could be, and you treated me that way. And not that
I believed in you.
You believed in me, and not with a controlling hand, not with a nagging or manipulative aspect, but freely saying, no, you're much better than that. I trust you, and I see where you're in process.
And in our upcoming, we did an interview with a couple who are business owners that's going to be coming out. And that's exactly what it's a really beautiful dynamic between husband and wife, of a wife really having a vision in her mind of like, I just see so much of what you can be, and holding that up for him. And it's really post. So that's a teaser. That's a teaser for another podcast.
Okay.
But,
all right, so let's go into
do you want to just go into that?
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to make, we keep like, I know we are going to get there, but, about sharing our own story. But one thing that I was thinking is that's why the beginning years of marriage are so hard.
Yes.
Is because right now in our marriage, do I have expectations? Sure, I do. But those expectations are also more grounded in reality because we know each other better.
Because we've matured. Our marriage has matured.
We've lived longer, and we kind of like are more realistic. But when you are first married, there's so much you have to learn. And it's kind of like you got to start somewhere, and then your expectations are tempered as you learn more about your spouse and you learn more about, oh, okay, this is the way it's going to be. Okay, all right. So I'm going to change this, expectation or whatever. So I think that it's good for couples, young couples, to realize that's one of the things that is difficult about your first years of marriage, is that you're still kind of like learning about those expectations and making them more realistic, and also dealing with the things that you may be disappointed in. So
all right.
anyway.
So
do you want to go first?
I'll go with, we want to go back and forth couple.
Sure.
Sure. So first, and this is the first
what
thing
did you
that came
expect
to
when we
mind.
got married?
So the first thing that I expected is that we would have sex every day.
Seriously?
I didn't think about it that much. I mean, like I thought about it a lot, but I didn't think about it. Like, I'm like, yeah, isn't that normal? Isn't that I never talked to somebody. I didn't ask what
That's true. That's true.
I don't know. But I also didn't think about it deeply, right? But I was just like, okay.
It was just an expectation.
Absolutely. Right. And I didn't.
Okay. And so for me, regarding our, sexual relationship, was I expected that I would enjoy it 100% of the time. I didn't even consider that there would be any times when I had a low libido. Like I didn't even think that would happen. I never, again, because I don't know, I just didn't really talk with lots of married people who were like, and I didn't realize how, especially not just my cycle, but also how pregnancy and childbirth would change my libido, and that I did not expect that at all. So, yeah.
Another expectation I had was that because I was pretty religious, that we were religious, we'd have minimal fights. Like for whatever.
You think like the more religious you are, the less fights you have?
I'm like looking back on it now. I don't think I ever said that. I don't know if I even technically thought that, but I think subconsciously I'm like, well, we're both, But
I do think that is what we mean by expectation. It's not something that's a conscious decision. It's just like, I don't know. I just assumed this. It's something you assume.
Because I'm like, well, hey, we're both pretty good. So therefore,
we're both good people.
So therefore,
we're not jerks.
We're not going to be fighting each other. We're not going to be
jerks fight.
And I remember seeing some other couples like squabble in front of us every now and then, and I'm like, oh, we're not like that. And I don't know if we fight in front of people, but we
did not fight in front of people.
We've had more fights than I thought we would have.
Oh my gosh, we had so many.
And
fights.
some of them big fights, and most of them I caused. So
that's very sweet of you to say that, but takes two to tango.
True.
Yeah, I think that in regards to the conflict, I expected that you would be able, and this sounds so stupid, but it's the best way to say it, that you could just read my mind. That you would know.
What I was about to say?
That you would know.
How to finish your sentences?
No, but that you would know what I wanted, like that you would know that like, I just really need a hug right now, or I just need some encouragement, or, even that you would be able to know what I wanted and I wouldn't have to say it. Like I wouldn't have to say, you know what, can we just have a minute here or something?
Think about when we had our first child. And I
was going to say our first dance, but go ahead. I'll tell that story in a second.
Oh, wow. All right.
No, go ahead. Right. You go ahead.
But that's a good one now that you're saying that. But like when we had the Katie, right? Like just you taking care of the baby.
Right. I
expected you coming from a large family to have it all figured out. And that I got the very distinct impression I was unnecessary. As a dad, I didn't know what I was doing. I hadn't been around little babies like you had. And I didn't know what my role was. And then it's maybe a role part, but it's also like an expectation. It wasn't like, oh, I had this for years.
Yeah.
But
it was an assumption.
Yeah, an assumption that I made, right? So.
And then what was wrong with that? Then what?
What I didn't realize is that every new mom, regardless of their experience, needs their husband to be with them and to be helping and not feel like she's doing this alone.
Right.
And
so Mike came home one day. And I literally remember this like it was yesterday. I can't believe it was so long ago, 29 years ago. I was sitting on the couch and he walked in, I was holding the baby and he's like, hey, how are you doing? How'd everything go today? And I think I just didn't say anything. And then I just started to cry.
Correct.
And he was like, what's wrong? What happened? Why are you crying? Don't cry. And I was just like crying and crying. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I need you, and then it all kind of came out. And so that's what I mean by like, I expected you would know what I needed without me having to say it, and that was very unrealistic.
It was unrealistic for me and it was unrealistic for you. But because of that colliding of false expectations, we became stronger. I felt needed in a way that I hadn't before. Therefore, I actually had a place. I had a role. I had something to do.
Right.
Which was pretty cool.
Right. It's funny how communication does that. It brings you closer together.
Shocking, but true.
Instead of both of us living in our expectations and then being mad and saying, well, he should know this. Or you just being like, well, I don't know, I guess she's fine, But when we break through that and actually are aware of our expectations and can speak them and say them, and just to say, I didn't know you felt that way, and just for the both of us, we're revealing your heart to the other person.
It was the vulnerability that you began, that I received, that then drew us to a greater place of unity.
Right.
And that those false expectations got peeled away pretty quickly because of your vulnerability, because of the ability of us, and for me, to take the time and to be intentional, to be genuinely concerned about how was your day,
Right.
And so having both spouses at a place of openness and willing to be vulnerable and to receive that vulnerability, that's when the good stuff happens. That's when, because we all have these, we'll go through more, but we all have these expectations, but what do we do with them? Mm-hmm. And the more that we reveal our hearts to one another, the more that we let down our guard and we share the innermost.
Yeah.
Even if they sound silly to us, right? When we say it out loud, we say it and the other can receive it and hold it like a precious gift.
Yeah.
And not dismiss it. And then we both grow both closer, but also mature in our love and unity.
And I think how you mature in that, so there first is that vulnerability of like expressing those expectations.
Yes.
But then for you to know going forward, like using the example of, the new baby, you going forward, okay, she is expecting that I will be an active participant in fathering and parenting this child. Okay, she's expecting that I'm good, that I'm going to go and support her and love her and say, hey, let me take the baby. And she's expecting that. So I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And so as opposed to, well, they're expecting that, but there's no way I can do that. There's no way I'm going to do that, because that's a whole other issue then in your marriage. If you recognize your spouse's expectations and then
walk away from them.
You walk away from them, you dash them, as opposed to trying to, to
Work
rise
on
up
yourself.
to that, or to say, you know what? It's really hard for me to do blank, or like using the sex every day thing, like for me to say, yeah, it'd be really hard for me to do that,
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
For various reasons, if I'm up with the baby 3 times a night, like that's not,
that expectation changed very quickly.
Yes. But I think that having that communication regarding those expectations, whether you can fulfill them if you can, or if not, then that's also something that has to be said. This is another thing, is even I'm thinking about couples who are like an introvert and extrovert, couples who really like going out and being with friends and partying. And there's an expectation that, my spouse is going to do this with me. For the other spouse who's the introvert, just to be able to say, hey, that's really hard for me to do that. I really don't want to do that every weekend, And so sometimes that's happened with us.
Yes.
Where I'm not that we're both extroverts for sure.
That was my
But there are certain parts. Oh, really?
Keep going.
But there's certain times when it's just like, well, I just expect that we'll be with my family like most holidays, because my family, meaning my brothers and sisters, my siblings, are such a good time. Like they're so much fun. And then for Mike to be like, well, my expectation was that we would sometimes see my family too. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess we would do that. And so, but to be able to talk about those things, and just, and say, okay. That's really, yes. So for you to say, okay, yeah, that's really hard for me to be with your family every single holiday.
Right.
And I was like, oh gosh, I did not expect that. Because you love my family,
Absolutely.
But, you got a family too.
And related to that, one of the things I wrote down was the expectation that I would always want to go out and do something fun. Meaning like something active, something in motion, going out to a festival or which we did a lot in our early parts, going out, just different places together. Right. And I've realized, I don't know if I've changed, I've matured, or I've just gotten tired. I don't know which, but there are many times where I'm just like, I would be comfortable just staying home with you, playing a game, talking to kids. Sometimes it just gets tiresome for me to be out in large crowds all the time or whatever, and so that's an expectation I had of myself, which has changed and evolved over time.
That was an expectation that I actually wrote down in my journal too, is that I expected that we would always want to be together, that we would always want to do stuff together.
Yeah, different but related. Yeah.
And sometimes, and I think this happens maybe to me more often than you, I think I kind of like want more alone time than you. You would always want us to be at least in the same room, not necessarily even talking together, but doing stuff together. Where I'm like, sometimes I'm like, I just want to be by myself. And that was an expectation that is different on my part. Okay. So just to kind of like, that's another thing about these expectations. That was an expectation that like I said, that I would have 100% joy in sex. Okay. That was an expectation I had of myself.
Right.
That was not realistic, or that I would always want to do everything with you. Yeah. Then I realized, no, sometimes, oh my gosh, I didn't realize this about myself. Sometimes I just want to be alone.
That's right.
Right. And so those kinds of things were also interesting to realize.
Because I would say that I did or do on some level have a desire just to hang out with you. We don't have to have deep conversations, but just to be together, right?
Right.
And nothing's wrong with either of those expectations. Mm-hmm. However, they do come in conflict.
Yeah,
and therefore you have to talk that through.
And, just side note, and I think it's because we did realize this early on, it's because in talking about the love languages, if I have love languages, which we've referred to before, one of Mike's love languages is physical touch. And that doesn't mean touching. It means like even being in proximity.
Yes.
That's important to you, that he just wants to be like in the same room as me.
Right.
And physical touch is my lowest one. Like even now
Don't
when the
touch
kids
Alicia.
the kids want to sit near me or
snuggle
snuggle or whatever, I'm just like, I'm just not a snuggly person.
It is
not
funny.
that I like hugs and stuff like that. It's not like I'm prickly, but it's just not my thing. Like the whole snuggling with mom when you're over the age of 5,
Yes. All right. Do you have anything else on your...
Oh, yes. Oh, I have so many expectations, Mike. So many expectations.
Keep going.
Okay, let's see. So I did have some expectations that did come to fruition.
Thank the Lord.
I did expect that we would have to work hard together.
Cha-ching. There you
go. Because I did feel like we were a good team. And also probably because I felt like my parents are very hard workers.
And you had that from your own experience growing up. You're like, okay, this is what it means to be married or an adult.
Yes.
Boom.
And what I mean by working, I don't mean just working for pay. I mean even my dad always fixed our cars. My mom was in the garden. Okay. We were all doing chores together. We were very much a working family growing up. And so I just kind of expected that there's so many things. At the beginning of our marriage, we paid no one to do. We painted all of our rooms. We put down flooring. We did all of our own landscaping. And we still kind of do that, because we just, I don't know. I expected we would work together.
You know what's interesting? I want you to keep going, but I do think that there is a time, life, right? Your early formative years, they leave a deep furrow of expectations on you. So we're talking about your marriage as those listening, our marriages, right? But it's also we're investing in a marriage culture in our home by the seeds that we plant in the lives of our kids. Meaning,
so in your early family life, you're investing in your marriage culture. Marriage culture.
So because
that's good, Mike. I'm gonna write that down.
Because your kids' best formation about marriage is your marriage.
Oh gosh, that's so true.
Far better than pre-Cana, any program, the best program out there. Not that we don't need programs, not that we don't need formation when they're actually getting married.
The church has to safeguard the sacrament.
Absolutely. And we can always enhance and grow in that area. But it is forming in your home a culture that's oriented towards marriage, a culture that's born towards the both realistic expectations and choosing joy, choosing in the midst of the small and the ordinary to really make that good. So your kids are seeing you. They're, much more is caught than taught. We always say that.
Yeah.
And they're picking up, this is what it looks like to be married. So one of the expectations you had was, hey, we're going to work together. This is how a family operates. Mom and dad, they have different roles. They have maybe their own spheres, right?
Yeah.
But they're both working. They're working hard and they're working together. They're complementary. One's not necessarily over the other. Blah, blah. Those are expectations that you brought because of your family experience.
That's true. My parents are definitely a team.
Many couples didn't have that experience, right? They don't have that formative experience of a marriage culture.
Didn't have that, I'm guessing.
Not really, not as a marriage culture, right? There's other aspects that I clearly gained, the hard work in different areas.
Right.
But no, that wasn't something
you didn't
I
experience
grew up
them working as a team.
I didn't know.
But I knew that you wanted that. I mean, I always felt like we've always been a good team.
Yeah, but it's different. It's different when you want something theoretically and you have it kind of ingrained in you by your experience and witness. And I think that...
But you were around other families, though.
I sought out other families that had a stronger marriage, right?
Right,
sure.
right. And all of our listeners who are coming from divorced homes, I'm sure that they can think about and look at other couples in their lives who were examples to them.
I'm going to say if they haven't, they need to. And I'd say every married couple, regardless of if you come from a divorced family background or not, you need to have another couple that you can point to and say, okay, they're realistic. You know, one of the reasons we call ourselves the Messy Family Project is because we want to pull back the curtain to say, this is what realistic looks like. This is what appropriate looks like. This is how a married couple can interact with each other. Both complementary, having differing opinions, but you need that in your personal life. You need that
in your parish, in your church.
Yeah, in a real way. All right, so what else you got? Anything else?
I expected that we would have a lot of kids.
Boom, done. Check.
I didn't have a number or anything, I don't think, but I was just like, I don't know. I just kind of expected that. I expected we would live in Philadelphia, which we didn't do. That's okay. I love where we live, so there's no problems. I actually expected, and until we did this podcast, I didn't realize how formative this was. I expected we would not have a lot of money. Again, probably because growing up,
much easier that way.
Yeah. Not that we're rich or anything now, but I think I thought we would kind of like always
be struggling.
And I don't think we're struggling now. We're just like, I don't know, regular. Right. But I think that's also because growing up, I did not grow up poor by any stretch of the imagination, but I did always get the sense of like that we were always like very conscious. My mother is very good with money and just very conscious of, saving money and doing things on your own and, living on a shoestring, if you will. So that's what I expected. So when we didn't have a lot of money, I was just like, yeah, that's what I expected.
Yeah. And I don't, and not that I want to cut you off by any means, but.
No, you're not. You're good.
But I don't know if this is just me or if it's men maybe in general. I think I had less expectations coming into marriage than you did. And I wonder if that's a male-female thing.
You must have had expectations regards to money.
Not really. Like maybe I'm a shallow person, but I don't think that's true.
I don't think so.
But I don't think I really played forward what marriage would look like.
Do you know what? I do remember on our premarital inventory that we were the lowest on talking about finances.
Yeah.
I do remember the priest was like, you guys need to talk about finances more. And I was just like, what is it to talk about? We're not going to have any money.
But we had very different expectations. Like, I'll put it this way. I think that we had different expectations for finances, faux show. But we both, I think, in some ways approached it the same way, right? Like in a weird way, in the sense that money is a means to an end and not an end in itself. Money comes as a byproduct of good hard work and all of that. Like these were all foundational principles that we would give and tithe, and that there were all these other good things that
we both knew we were going to tithe.
A budget was a good idea, even if we didn't know exactly what that looked like. And but I was much more of a restricted, controlling, where you were, let's not be frivolous, but let's get a good deal. Let's spend money. And I was like, let's not spend anything. And you were like, let's get the deal.
That's true. I do remember that.
And but
we did fight about money.
And maybe the expectations I had were more subconscious or unaware on my part.
Yeah, of course.
But I remember as you started talking about this, I'm like, yeah, I don't remember having an expectation for that. Like, what was parenting going to look like? Mm-hmm. I mean, I desired to be a dad. Yes. I had a great desire to be a dad,
which is one of the reasons I married you.
Yes, but But after that initial thought, I don't.
And
think,
nothing. It was just like a void.
Yeah, it was just like unknown. It was, and it really was for me. Again, coming from a divorced background, I had a blank map in front of me that was uncharted territory.
Yes.
And so it was hard for me to set even what an expectation. I probably had them, but I didn't set any expectations.
I think a lot of people, more than makes sense, I think a lot of people listening can relate to that.
Yeah, just because, and there was some fear because of that coming into marriage. And so expectations or lack of expectations can put you at a very precarious place. Mm-hmm, and for me, that did, again, early on particularly, I'm like, I had confidence, but it was
because you have confidence in general in life.
I do, but it was very much a blind confidence.
Okay.
And I think that's the best image that I can think of, is that there was a map where I got up to step 2.
Yeah.
And then it was the entire other half of the map, or more than half of the map, was blank, and there was no markings, and I didn't know where.
And I think, just so our listeners know, and I think we've talked about this at the very, very beginning on our very first 1 or 2, 3, 4 podcasts. I think in some ways that was like, you knew what you didn't know.
Yes.
And so because of that, you did not come in to marriage saying, I'm going to be an amazing dad because I had this great example and I know how to do this, but instead came in with a real humility of saying, you know what, I'm going to figure this out. I have to figure this out. I have to learn. And so we read a lot of parenting books, and we looked to other couples, and we did parenting courses, you know, not Catholic parenting courses because there were none, which is, that's what we're working on. But I think that there was a gift there as well, because I think your humility helped us to start that conversation between the two of us, you know, of just like that we knew that we would figure this out together. Because I think you did, though, you didn't have that map, but like you said, like that step 2, you know, you didn't have to see what was after that, but you did have an attitude, at least I would project it to me, like, we're going to figure this out.
Yeah.
We're going to figure this out.
That wasn't an immediate thing. That did come through some time. And I'll throw in another expectation. You know, later on in marriage, I kind of expected that once we had gone past 10, 15 years of marriage, we really wouldn't fight anymore.
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
do you know what I mean, though? Like, I came to that expectation that I was like, okay, we're working through.
Are we still fighting about this? You know,
and there are some little issues that kept cropping up in little ways that we never fully maybe resolved, or came up in a different form or whatever. And that was hard. I mean, you know, when you have your expectation meeting reality.
You know what it is?
That's frustrating.
You know what it is? It's that as far as the expectations in the middle of our marriage there, it's you think that you're going to get to a point, then you can just coast.
Yeah.
You know, you think, okay, hey, we're good. We got through the first 10 years. We know each other. We have a good rhythm. You know, we are not fighting about money anymore. Like, we are kind of like in this good place. What we didn't expect, and this is what I would hope other people understand this, you're never done. You're never done growing, because yes, maybe those things, maybe you got to that level of deal, but then there's more. Yeah. Then you're like, okay, God's like, okay, I'm going to take you to the next level, you know? Yeah. And then even within the last 10 years of doing this podcast, guys, to all of our listeners, you know, we've grown even in this past 10 years because God has said, okay, you got all of those down. You know, you're at the you know, junior high level. Well, now we're gonna have you do this business together. We're just gonna take you to the graduate level, you know, or at least high school or college level, you know. And that there's always more. There's always more. I think we're in
graduate school now.
I feel like my parents are in graduate school. I don't know. My parents are like the teachers at this point. But even my parents, who've been married 54 years, I look at them and I see how they are still growing in their communication with each other, and, you know, and their little like conflicts and things, but still they're at such a deeper level than us, but there's always more to learn. So I don't want anybody listening we want to kind of have that realistic expectation that you're never done. There's always more that God, it's just kind of like holiness, right?
No, yeah.
You never stop being holy. And if you are a married person, that means your path to holiness is through your spouse and through your family.
And I don't want to cut you off. Did you have any more you want to add?
You keep saying you don't want to cut me off, but you're not cutting me off.
All right. Well, but I mean, I'm going to go to the next topic if you're.
Okay, let's see here. Last thing that, this is kind of that like, along with the parenting thing, like what you're saying, I thought that I would enjoy my children 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize, I think I didn't expect how difficult parenting would be.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, how hard can it be? My parents didn't look like they didn't make it look hard.
and I expected after having a whole bunch of kids, we would have had it all figured out. and that it would have been
Absolutely.
easy. Now, it is much easier today than it was before, and we have confidence, and I do have a map now, right? Like I look back and I'm like, there are still plenty uncharted years ahead.
You know what the problem is?
What's the
problem? The kids are all different.
What's up with that?
The kids are all different, and
who allowed that?
They keep growing. So once we figured out little kids, then they became teenagers. We were like, we know what we're doing. Then after we got through the teenagers, we're like, okay, we can do teenagers. Now we're like, adult children. What do we do? How do we do this? So, and they're all different too. So some things that work with some kids don't work with others.
It is a great adventure. But just to kind of.
But we do have a map, yeah.
And I think that's what I want to just kind of close out with this kind of.
Sounds great.
Some practical ideas, but I think the big picture idea is that when you're early on, you don't, and it's good that you don't see the whole map.
Absolutely, you would be overwhelmed.
You would be overwhelmed.
So true.
And so true. When you feel like you're in the survival zone, right? We're talking about expectations in marriage, so we'll stay in on marriage. But let's just say you're in the survival zone. You got a lot of kids around you. You got little kids that are just. They're crawling all over the place.
They're destroying things. They're crying. They're getting sick. 1, 2, or 3 kids fighting.
Under the age of 5, right? And it's hard. And you're supposed to only see this part. But you know what? Get the habits early in your marriage. And you know what? The first thing is be grateful. Every day, be grateful for your spouse. Recognize that it is gift. That your spouse is a gift. So even in the midst of sleepless nights, if you're in the early stages, as you're moving through work and career expanding and all these challenges, uncharted areas that you're going to go through, choose to be grateful. Make it an intentional moment. Even if you're in the midst of a fight right now, like if you've got a blown out fight that you're in the midst of and haven't resolved, stop and be grateful for your spouse.
Yeah.
And then make some small gestures, small actions.
Wait, can I just talk about being grateful first?
Go ahead.
I was also thinking to be grateful for what you have. We've mentioned finances a bunch of times here. So if you are struggling with money and that's an area of conflict in your marriage, or maybe you really need more income, maybe you don't have enough money to make your expenses, take some time and be grateful for what you have. You are grateful, be grateful for the fact that you can, have a device to listen to this podcast, that you have a roof over your head. Just be great. Think about what are you grateful for, even those physical things that you're grateful for. That gratefulness is a wonderful antidote to unfulfilled expectations.
Yeah, and just to kind of double down on what you said is with gratitude, if you don't have the desire, if you don't feel it, fake it. And pray for the desire to be grateful. Grateful for the house with the drafty windows.
And write it down.
And then say it aloud. Say it to your spouse. Say it in front of your kids. Make it a prayer. So your kids, so you're creating again this culture of gratitude within your home.
Yeah.
Where they say, this is what it means to be an adult. They look at this world around me and they see something that I don't always see, right?
Yeah.
That squeaky door that always ticks you off, or
there's a scene in the movie Big George Foreman. Is that what it's called? Big George Foreman. He was very poor growing up, and his mother came home. There's 3 or 4 of them, and had 1 cheeseburger.
Yes. Yes.
And they were grateful, and they stopped, and she prayed thanksgiving to God. It's a beautiful scene. And then his sister is so generous, and it's George, you take it, you need it, and it's gosh, what a wonderful example like that of just being grateful, even for the little that you have at that moment.
So be grateful. The second is find happiness in the small, ordinary things. Meaning, take the small and ordinary. Do the small and ordinary things. It's the little gestures that really matter. But find there's some joy in that, and really offer those ordinary things, because it's in the ordinary that when we offer them to God, when we offer them with love, that they become extraordinary.
So I want to just read this quote that Mike put in here from Pope Francis. He said, "Love is shown by little things, by attention to small daily signs which make us feel at home. Faith grows when it's lived and shaped by love. That's why our families, our homes, are true domestic churches. They are the right place for faith to become life and life to grow in faith." I mean, I was thinking about the little things, like even just like having a clean kitchen, making your bed, go outside, look at the trees, look at the birds, look at the flowers, like notice those little daily things.
You gotta seek it out.
Yes. Yeah. You have to seek it out, the hug that you give to your kids before they go to school, like sitting around the breakfast table, the fact that you can be together, like all of those little things, I think it's very, very important, because in the busyness of our world, we often expect happiness to come in the big things.
Yes.
Which sometimes that can happen, but I think on a daily basis, it comes in the little things.
And that's what we need. We need that daily basis. And finally, so choose gratitude, find happiness, find love, find beauty in the small, ordinary things. And then finally, give yourself away. Your expectations are no match for your actions. Meaning, if you expect your wife or your husband to know your thoughts, give yourself away. Be vulnerable with them. Share your thoughts, right? Love them.
Ask them about their thoughts.
Yes, and open it up for them, right?
Yeah.
And when you see your spouse maybe being frustrated, maybe they're not, reach out. Reach into their heart, be their protector, be their shield, be their encourager. Again, thinking of how can I help my spouse be happier in this life and in the next, right? How can I build a life where I am giving myself away?
Yeah.
Because it really is, and this isn't just a trite thing, right? God said it, so it must be true. It is in giving that we receive. It's in our gift of self.
Yeah.
That we actually discover a bit about who we are. And it's when we receive the happiness that we long for, that our hearts desire. It comes from us just giving ourselves. And there's nobody that you're supposed to give yourself to more completely on this earth than your spouse. So when you make your expectations meet with love, with your action of love.
Very good.
All right.
So we will put the key takeaways in the show notes, but I do, because I think that we kind of sum things up there. Yeah. But I do want to encourage spouses to have a couple discussion about this topic, especially. So one first great question is, think about, each of you maybe just kind of silently sit down and write down what were your expectations? Right. When you were engaged or dating. It was hard for me to think of expectations because it's been, over 30 years. But write those down. What were your expectations coming into marriage? Just kind of like do a list and then share them with each other. Yeah. What were your expectations? And then I would say probably the second question is maybe what are some of your disappointments or things that were hard for you? Right. And
again, this is not about you trying to correct or critique somebody, but revealing your heart, right? You're sharing your heart, being vulnerable with your spouse.
And then the last thing I would say for your couple discussion is, what are you grateful for?
What are you most grateful for?
What are you most grateful for? Maybe start taking or keeping a gratitude journal, of like looking at those expectations and disappointments. And then, because I think that those three things all together kind of bring you in a complete circle. Because if you say, hey, I expected that we would never struggle with money. My disappointment is that we do. But you know what? I'm so grateful for how hard you work. I'm so grateful that we can operate as a team. I'm so grateful for the way that we can communicate about this issue. So just kind of like keep in mind all three of those things are really needed. And I hope that it results in a deeper, more vulnerable and authentic relationship between spouses.
Yeah, because your marriage is worth it.
Absolutely.
Again, as we said at the very beginning, your marriage is always important, but it's not always urgent. So we need to make time for your marriage. If you care about your marriage, invest in it. Talk about the expectations you've had and maybe even have still today or that are frustrating to you, and then lead to gratitude.
Do you want to end in prayer?
Yeah, let's pray.
Okay.
In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, amen. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the great gift that marriage is for us. We thank you for our spouses, for the joy that they are in our lives, as well as the challenge they are to draw us out to the men and women you desire us to be. Be with these marriages. Help us renew the culture of marriage in our families and in our world. Bless and strengthen us, Lord, right in the midst of our struggle and our moment right now. In your name we pray. Amen. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Again, if you want any of that information about the webinars and courses and resources we have, visit us at messyfamilyproject.org or visit us for the Catholic Couples Getaway for those last couple of spots. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.